Welcome to the Korean Mafia romance stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. Every man in that room had killed before, and I was the only one who was not afraid. That was the first mistake they made about me. They thought fear was something you either had or you did not. They did not understand that fear is a choice, and I had stopped choosing it a long time ago. The room was exactly what you would expect from men who built their lives on control and violence. Dim lighting. Expensive suits. Eyes that calculated before they blinked. No one laughed. No one spoke unless it mattered. This was not a meeting. This was a battlefield dressed like a negotiation. Miami looked beautiful from the outside, but underneath, rooms like this decided who got to breathe and who disappeared. I was not supposed to be there. That much was obvious the moment I walked in. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Not subtly. Not politely. Every single person in that room noticed me, and none of them liked what they saw. A black woman with no escort, no introduction, no visible protection. In their world, that meant one of two things. Either I was stupid, or I was already dead. I let them think whatever they wanted. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have, sealing me inside a room full of men who had never been told no in their lives. I did not rush. I did not hesitate. I walked forward like I belonged there, even though I knew I did not. Or maybe I did, just not in the way they understood. At the center of the room sat Cha Dong-hyuk. He did not need to speak for people to know who he was. Power has a way of making space around itself, and he sat in that space like it was built for him. His family surrounded him, watching everything, controlling everything, making sure nothing slipped through their fingers. The moment his eyes landed on me, something shifted. Not in the room. In him. He did not look disgusted like the others. He did not look amused. He looked interested. That was more dangerous than anything else in that room. One of his relatives leaned toward him, whispering something in Korean, not quietly enough to hide the tone. I did not need to understand the words to know what they meant. She does not belong here. Another voice followed. She will embarrass us. Then another. She will ruin you. I heard every version of rejection without a single one being said directly to my face. That was their style. Polished cruelty. I kept walking. No hesitation. No apology. When I reached the table, I did something no one else in that room expected. I did not bow. I did not lower my eyes. I did not wait to be acknowledged. I pulled out a chair and sat down like the seat had been mine all along. The reaction was immediate. Subtle, but sharp. A shift in posture. A tightening of jaws. Someone inhaled like they were about to speak, then stopped, waiting for Dong-hyuk to decide how this would play out. Because in that room, nothing happened without his permission. I met his gaze directly. No fear. No challenge. Just truth. And that was the thing they could not understand. I was not there to prove anything. I was not there to impress them. I was not there to survive their world. I was there because I had already survived worse. In a room where fear was currency, I refused to pay. The first move came fast, subtle enough that anyone outside that world would have missed it, but in that room, it landed like a warning shot. One of Dong-hyuk's cousins leaned forward, fingers tapping lightly against the polished table, his eyes scanning me with open disdain. He asked who invited me, but the way he said it made it clear he already believed the answer was no one. I could feel the room tightening, waiting for me to stumble, to apologize, to shrink into something easier to dismiss. I did not give him that. I looked at him, calm, steady, and asked if permission was something he needed to feel important. The air shifted immediately. A few heads turned more sharply this time, not out of curiosity, but irritation. That was not how this game was played. Not in this room. Not with people like them. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carries a threat underneath it, and he told me I should be careful with my words. I told him I already was. That was why I chose them carefully instead of wasting them. Silence followed, heavier now, more deliberate. This was no longer about whether I belonged. It was about whether I would survive staying. Dong-hyuk had not spoken yet, but I could feel his attention on me, sharper than anyone else in the room. He was watching, measuring, waiting. That alone told me everything I needed to know. He was not offended. He was interested. And that made me more dangerous than they realized. Another voice cut in, this time from his aunt, her tone smooth but edged with something colder. She asked if I understood where I was. Not the city. Not the building. The room. I leaned back slightly, letting the question settle before answering. I said I understood exactly where I was, and that was why I had not wasted time pretending to be afraid. That answer did not sit well. You could see it in the way her fingers tightened around her glass, the way her posture stiffened just enough to betray the control she was trying to maintain. Fear, in that room, was not just expected. It was required. Without it, their power had nothing to anchor to. That was when Dong-hyuk finally moved. Not much. Just a shift forward, his hand resting lightly on the table, but the entire room responded instantly. Conversation stopped completely. Even breathing seemed quieter. Control, without effort. He asked me a question, simple on the surface, but layered underneath. Why are you here? No accusation. No anger. Just curiosity sharpened into something dangerous. I could feel the weight of every eye on me, waiting for the wrong answer. I did not rush. I did not soften my tone. I told him I was there because people like him only trust what they cannot control, and I was the one thing in that room that did not belong to anyone. A pause followed, long enough to matter. Someone shifted in their seat. Someone else exhaled slowly. This was not going the way they expected. Dong-hyuk's gaze did not leave mine. If anything, it sharpened, like he had just found something he had not been looking for but was not willing to ignore. He asked if I thought I was above their rules. I told him rules built on fear were not rules. They were limitations. And I was not interested in living inside someone else's limits. That was when it happened. The moment everything tilted. A low murmur spread through the room, not loud, but enough to signal a shift in tension. This was no longer entertainment. This was disruption. One of the men at the far end of the table stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that cut through the silence. He took a step toward me, his presence aggressive, calculated to intimidate. He told me I had no idea who I was talking to. I looked at him, then past him, back to Dong-hyuk, and said I knew exactly who I was talking to. That was why I was not impressed. The room froze. Not metaphorically. Completely. Because that was not just disrespect. That was defiance. Direct and undeniable. For a second, no one moved. No one spoke. Even the man standing near me hesitated, caught between reacting and waiting for permission. Because in that room, power was not about who spoke the loudest. It was about who everyone else waited for. Dong-hyuk did not raise his voice. He did not show anger. But something changed in his expression, something subtle and dangerous. He told the man to sit down. Just that. No explanation. No justification. And the man obeyed immediately, the tension dissolving into something quieter but far more serious. That was when I understood exactly how much control Dong-hyuk had. Not through fear alone, but through expectation. Through certainty. Everyone in that room believed he would win any conflict before it even started. That was power. But power like that comes with a weakness. It depends on everyone agreeing to believe in it. And I did not. I leaned forward slightly, meeting his gaze without hesitation, and said something no one else in that room would have dared to say. Power that needs fear is already weak. The words did not echo, but they landed hard enough to silence everything again. This time, the silence was different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Acknowledging. Because whether they agreed or not, they understood exactly what I meant. Dong-hyuk did not respond right away. He studied me, not like an enemy, not like a threat, but like something new. Something unpredictable. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. I was no longer a mistake in his eyes. I was a variable. Something that could not be controlled, and because of that, something he could not ignore. That was the moment he stopped seeing me as a problem. And started seeing me as something far more dangerous. Dong-hyuk did not dismiss me after that meeting. That was the first sign something had shifted in a way his family did not like. Men like him did not entertain disruptions. They eliminated them, corrected them, or ignored them until they disappeared. But he did none of those things. Instead, he asked me to stay. Not publicly. Not in front of his family. Just a quiet command as the room emptied, his voice low, controlled, leaving no space for refusal without turning it into something else. I stayed, not because he asked, but because I wanted to see what he would do next. That was the difference between us and everyone else in that room. They responded to power. I responded to curiosity. When the doors closed and the last of his family stepped out, the silence that remained felt different from before. It was no longer performative. It was real. He stood across from me, no table, no distance, no witnesses. Just two people who had refused to follow the same rules. He asked me who I really was. Not my name. Not my background. Something deeper. I told him the truth, or at least the version of it he needed to hear. I said I was someone who learned early that fear makes you predictable, and predictable people do not survive long in dangerous places. His expression did not change, but I saw the way his focus sharpened, the way he processed every word like it might be useful later. He asked me if I understood what kind of world I had walked into. I told him I did, and that was why I was not impressed by it. That made something flicker in his eyes, not anger, not amusement, something closer to recognition. For the first time, the conversation shifted away from testing and toward something more complicated. Interest. Not the shallow kind. The dangerous kind that makes people take risks they normally would not. Over the next few days, he kept finding reasons to bring me back into his space. Private meetings. Conversations that had no clear purpose except to continue what had started between us. His family noticed immediately. They always did. People who build their lives on control develop a sharp instinct for anything that threatens it. I could feel their attention follow me even when I was not in the room. Whispers. Glances. Calculations. I had gone from an embarrassment to a problem. And now, something worse. A variable they could not predict. Dong Hyuk did not hide it either. That was what made it more dangerous. He did not soften his tone with me. He did not treat me gently. If anything, he pushed harder, asked sharper questions, placed me in situations designed to expose weakness. One night, he took me to a warehouse on the edge of the city, a place where deals were finalized without paperwork and mistakes were corrected without witnesses. The air smelled like metal and salt, heavy and unforgiving. He told me to stand still while two men argued violently in front of us, their voices rising, their hands twitching toward weapons they were ready to use. Anyone else would have stepped back. Anyone else would have tried to disappear into the background. I did not move. I watched. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I refused to react the way they expected. When one of the men suddenly pulled a gun, the tension snapped, sharp and immediate. The others in the room flinched, just slightly, just enough to show they understood the danger. I did not. Not because I did not see it, but because I chose not to give it power. Dong Hyuk's voice cut through the moment, calm and absolute, stopping everything before it escalated further. The gun lowered. The argument dissolved. Control reasserted itself. He turned to me then, his gaze searching, measuring. You did not react, he said. I shrugged slightly and told him reacting would not have changed the outcome. That answer stayed with him. I could see it in the way he watched me after that, more closely, more deliberately. The distance between us shifted, not physically, but in something harder to define. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Something that did not exist before. That was when his family escalated. Subtle at first, then more direct. One of his sisters approached me during a gathering, her smile polished but empty, her words wrapped in something that sounded polite but carried a clear message underneath. She told me I was entertaining, but temporary. That people like me do not last in their world. I told her worlds like theirs only last as long as no one challenges them. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. That was enough. The tension between us was no longer hidden. It was active. Alive. Growing. Dong Hyuk saw it. He saw everything. And instead of shutting it down, he let it happen. That was what changed everything. Because in his world, allowing conflict meant inviting consequences. He should have corrected me. Controlled me. Removed me. But he did not. He watched. He waited. And somewhere in that silence, something shifted inside him. I saw it in the way his attention lingered longer than necessary. In the way his voice lowered when he spoke to me, not softer, but more focused. In the way he stopped expecting obedience and started expecting resistance. That was new for him. I could feel it. And I understood what it meant before he ever said it. He did not want me to follow him. He wanted me to challenge him. That kind of desire does not come without a cost. Because in a world built on control, wanting something you cannot control is the most dangerous weakness of all. I saw it clearly. Even if he did not. Even if he refused to admit it. And the moment that realization settled between us, everything changed in a way that could not be undone. In his world, attachment was not just a risk. It was a liability. And whether he realized it or not, I was becoming exactly that. They did not confront me directly at first. People like Dong Hyuk's family never did. They preferred precision over chaos, control over confrontation. So instead of threats, they gave me situations. Carefully designed. Quietly executed. The kind that looked like coincidence until you survived enough of them to see the pattern. The first was simple. A meeting I was not supposed to attend. A location I was not supposed to know. Yet somehow, I was invited. Not by Dong Hyuk. By his brother. The one who had not spoken much before, the one who watched more than he reacted. That alone told me this was not a test. This was a move. The building was empty when I arrived. Not abandoned. Just cleared. The kind of silence that does not happen by accident. I stepped inside anyway. Because walking away would have meant admitting they could control where I went. And I refused to give them that. The door closed behind me with a soft click that echoed longer than it should have. I kept walking. No hesitation. No second guessing. The hallway stretched ahead, dim lights flickering just enough to make the shadows feel alive. Halfway through, I heard footsteps. Not rushing. Not hiding. Deliberate. I did not turn immediately. I let them get closer, let them think they had the advantage. Then I stopped and faced them. 2 men. Not family. Not close enough for that. But trained. Controlled. The kind of men who did not ask questions. One of them spoke first, his voice flat, professional. He told me I was not supposed to be there. I told him I was exactly where I needed to be. That answer was enough. They moved at the same time. Fast. Efficient. Designed to end things quickly. I did not panic. I did not freeze. I stepped back just enough to break their timing, then shifted, letting their momentum work against them instead of me. One reached for me, and I redirected the force, his balance collapsing before he understood what went wrong. The second adjusted faster, but not fast enough. This was not my first time in a situation like this. That was the mistake they made. They thought I was unprotected. They did not consider that I might be trained. The fight did not last long. It never does when the outcome is already decided. When it was over, the hallway returned to silence, but something had changed. Not in me. In them. Because this was no longer about removing a problem quietly. This was about understanding what they were dealing with. I stepped over one of the men and continued walking, like nothing had happened. Because for me, it had not. Not really. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. But I knew it would not stay that way. Moves like that always triggered responses. And this time, the response came faster than expected. Donghyuk found me before I could leave the area. Not by chance. Never by chance. He stepped out of the shadows like he had been there the whole time, his expression tighter than I had ever seen it. Not angry. Controlled anger. The kind that sits just under the surface, waiting for the right moment to break something. You were not supposed to be here, he said. I looked at him and told him neither were they. That was when the silence between us shifted again. Not tension. Not distance. Something sharper. He had not known. That much was clear. Which meant his family had moved without him. That was not just a problem. That was a line crossed. He asked me if I was hurt. Not as a formality. As a fact he needed confirmed. I told him no. He did not relax. That was when I understood something important. This was no longer just about control or curiosity. This was personal. He turned slightly, his attention shifting beyond me, calculating, connecting pieces faster than anyone else could. They acted without permission, he said, more to himself than to me. I told him they acted because they thought he would not. That hit. Not visibly. But enough. Because it was true. He had allowed too much space. Too much uncertainty. And in a world like his, uncertainty invites betrayal. That was when it happened. The shift. Not in me. In him. He stopped trying to balance both sides. He stopped pretending this could be contained. He made a decision. Quietly. Completely. He told me to stay where I was. Not as a command. As a precaution. Then he walked away, already pulling his phone out, already setting something in motion. I should have left. That would have been the smart choice. The safe choice. But I did not. Because I wanted to see how far this would go. And because I understood something his family did not. I was not the threat they thought I was. I was the trigger. Within hours, the tension inside his world surfaced. Not publicly. Not loudly. But enough for those who understood to see it. Meetings cancelled. Calls unanswered. Movements restricted. The kind of internal fracture that does not happen unless something serious has broken. And at the center of it was a single decision. He chose me. Not openly. Not with words. But with action. And in his world, that was louder than anything else. When he came back to me, his expression was different. Not softer. More certain. He told me this would not stop. That his family would not accept it. I told him I already knew. Then I asked the only question that mattered. What are you going to do about it? He held my gaze for a long moment, then gave me an answer that changed everything. I already did. In that moment, I understood exactly what that meant. He had not just defended me. He had drawn a line. And in a family like his, lines like that do not stay quiet. They turn into wars. The moment he chose me, he did not just protect me. He declared something far more dangerous. He declared war on his own blood. The war did not explode the way most people imagine. There were no dramatic speeches, no loud declarations, no visible lines drawn in public. It unfolded the way real power shifts always do. Quietly. Precisely. Irreversibly. I stood beside Donghyuk in a room that looked almost identical to the one where this all began, but everything about it felt different. The same men were there, the same polished suits, the same controlled silence, but the balance had shifted. They were not watching me with disgust anymore. They were watching me with caution. Because now, I was not just the woman who refused to bend. I was the reason everything was breaking. His family sat across from us, their expressions measured, but the tension beneath it was undeniable. This was no longer about embarrassment or control. This was about survival. One of them spoke, his voice calm, but edged with something sharp enough to cut through the room. He said this situation had gone too far. That I was destabilizing something that had taken years to build. I listened, unmoved, because I already knew how this would end. Dong-hyuk did not respond immediately. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of expectation settle on everyone in the room. Then he spoke, and when he did, it was not as a son. It was as the man who owned everything they were trying to protect. He said nothing had gone too far. He said it had simply reached the point where truth could not be ignored anymore. That was when everything fractured. Words turned sharper. Loyalties shifted. The illusion of unity collapsed under the pressure of something they could not control. And through all of it, I did not step back. I did not hide behind him. I stepped forward. Because I was not there to be protected. I was there to end it. I told them something they would never forget. That their power had never come from fear alone. It came from people believing they had no choice. And the moment someone refuses to believe that, everything starts to fall apart. That moment had already happened. They just had not realized it yet. What followed was not chaos. It was dismantling. Decisions made quickly. Alliances cut cleanly. Authority redirected without hesitation. The kind of ending that does not leave room for recovery. When it was over, the room felt emptier than before, not because people were gone, but because the structure they relied on no longer existed. Dong-hyuk stood beside me, not above me, not in front of me. Beside me. That was the difference. He looked at me, his expression steady, certain in a way it had not been before. You were never in danger, he said quietly. They were. I held his gaze, letting that settle, understanding what it meant. I had walked into a room full of monsters, and instead of becoming one of them, I had changed the rules they lived by. The fear they controlled no longer worked on me. And without that, they had nothing. I turned slightly, looking at what remained of their world, then back at him. I was never here to survive them. I said it calmly, because it was true. I was here to make sure they could not survive me. I walked into a room full of monsters, and I walked out without becoming one. That is the difference they will never understand. Power built on fear collapses the moment someone refuses to be afraid, and respect only exists when it is earned, not forced. I did not change who I was to survive their world. I made their world change around me. So tell me this, if you were in that room, surrounded by people who could destroy you with a single word, would you stand your ground, or would you become exactly what they expected you to be? If this story pulled you in, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know what you would have done.